Hello everyone! Last year I've been doing these live experience sharing sessions, sharing some of the cool front-end related stuff I've been doing on my projects. Well, I've decided to change the format. I'm going to be making some short videos with tips and tricks on front-end styling. This is the first one. Hope you enjoy watching it as much as I enjoyed making it. Okay, let's get started. This is the design we have to make. I made this design for the video. It were my first steps with Figma, so I learned a lot. Let's just say it's for educational purposes only. As you can see, it has a mobile version and a desktop version. It's basically some cards side by side on desktop and column on mobile. So let's start with the mobile one first. Usually that's the simplest one, so it's always a good idea to start there and build up from that. First up is the HTML. I used to do this with div tags all over the place, but I have learned that it's better to use article tag here. This is what Mozilla Developer Network has to say about the article tag. Our cards are only for training purposes, but they could very well be a blog entry or something like that, so the article tag is good for this one. We've already added an H3 for the title of our card. This is a style sheet for our card. It's a pretty straightforward flex column layout and some extra spacing and a nice shadowed border. I'm using Sass here and I've added some design tokens. Basically, these are some variables that may or may not change later. These can help when the design would change later on, making it more readable instead of some magic numbers where you need to guess what it all does. For this example, it's probably overkill, but I find it a good practice to show here. If you're not sure what needs to be a variable, talk with the designer. They usually have a set of spacings they reuse in their design system or have an idea on things that might change at a later time. They can also help in naming those variables, so the code and the design can use the same definitions. So this is what our card component looks like. It's all alone now, so let's give it some friends and somewhere to live. This is going to be an Angular component, hence the ng-content tag, which is just a container where the cards will be placed, or any other elements that may be required later on. I'm using the section tag here, and here's what the documentation says about the section tag. It fits nicely in our case, I think. I imagined several sections on our webpage in the end, each with their own heading and purpose. So here's our card container with some cards in it. I've started with 3, since our design shows 3 cards. We can verify with the design if we did good or not. Since we're only doing the mobile part to start with, this should be enough for the first version. For the spacing, I'm using a variable again. And it looks okay, just like our design. Well done. Of course, when we stretch the page a bit more, it's not correct. We need to fix this for the desktop version. A possible way to fix the desktop version is to add a media query. This says that when the screen is 600 pixels or more, it should become a row instead of a column. So the mobile part comes first, and the desktop part comes later on. And the desktop version looks fine as well. I've added some max width on the overall page for really big screens. So now we show this to our designer to get some feedback on how we're doing. They tell us that the cards should wrap around when they get too small. So we go back to the code and see what we can do about that. Adding flex wrap should fix the card staying in one row all the time. This way we can get rid of the media queries, since the width of the items will decide if they wrap or not. The width of the items will be decided with the flex attribute. It's short for flex grow, flex shrink, flex basis. So here I define that the cards should all grow to fill an equal part of the container. The cards should not shrink in size, this will cause the wrapping behavior, and they should start at 300 pixels wide, which is fine for mobile. Oh, and I should probably name that value so it's more clear what I'm doing here. So it's looking fine for mobile and for desktop, but in between it's kind of weird. That can't be what the designer intended. We go back to the designer and show our new card styling, which is now wrapping around, but may not be what they want. Indeed, that's not what he meant. The card that wraps around should be below the first card and not take up the entire width. So how are we going to fix that? Well, flex was fine until now, but we're going to need the power of CSS grid layout. So I change the display property from flex to grid. I get rid of flex property on the card since I'm moving to grid layout. But I'm going to need a template for the columns. I need to tell it how many columns there should be. Should I introduce media queries again? Like this? Start with one column and grow from there? Let's see if this works. It works! Woohoo! But there's still something bugging me. Those media queries are a lot of trial and error when I think about it. Making design tokens for this can help, I'm not sure. Maybe there's a better way. What if we could have just one variable to control where our cards are placed in the grid? I still have that variable lying around from the flex layout before. It defines the minimum width of a card. That actually sounds like something I can talk to a designer about. Just one value as a minimal width. Of course it should be in rems. So there is this way of dynamically generating the columns using the repeat function. Using autofit, this will let the browser calculate how many items should be in each track based on the size definition we give it. But what size should I put here? Repeat lets you provide a min-max function as the value. It defines a size range greater than or equal to min and less than or equal to max. So max, this would be 1 fr, meaning one fraction of the available space. But what about the min value? It's possible to put another function in there. Here I'm using min, which just lets you set the smallest value from a list of comma-separated expressions. So here it will choose which is smallest, either 100% of the width, for when it's on mobile, or our minimum card width, for when it's on desktop. I find this really confusing, so I've tried to give some examples here. Let's say for desktop, 100% is about 1200 pixels. The min function would return 300 pixels since it's smaller than 1200. Min-max returns a value equal to or less than one fraction and larger or equal to 300 pixels. So for desktop, this means the three cards are nicely in one row. When the screen becomes smaller, let's say 800 pixels wide, 100% would be those 800 pixels. The min function would return 300 pixels again, since it's smaller than 800. Min-max will again provide a value between 300 pixels and one fraction. If the browser would then put three cards in one row, the cards would be smaller than 300 pixels wide. So it has to put one of them in the second row in order to stay in the min-max range. Let's see what that looks like. So to sum up, I'm happy with this approach because it's responsive but without media queries. There's only one variable to steer our styling and it's something anyone will understand. The card doesn't care about the container it's in. It has no width defined whatsoever, so it can be reused in all kinds of places. That's it for now. Hope you liked this video. As this is my very first video like this, I'm anxious to see what you think of it. Please leave a comment down below. Any feedback is greatly appreciated. See you next time.